We're a little over a month away from the 2014 NFL Draft, and I'm sure that's got a lot of you excited, just like it's got me very, 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 very excited. And part of the build-up to the NFL Draft is me talking a lot about the 2014 NFL Draft. And that's what I'll definitely be doing all throughout the month of April. I will be taking a look at each of the 32 teams in the National Football League and kind of analyze what direction I think they should go in May's upcoming 2014 NFL Draft. Of course, I will start today with the team that holds the number 1 overall selection in that 2014 NFL Draft, the Houston Texans. Now, to understand where they need to go, it's kind of important to understand what they've done in recent years. And I, of course, am a huge proponent of building teams through the NFL Draft. That's ultimately the best and most effective way to build a championship team, and also the most effective way to build a consistent contending team. When you look at the Houston Texans and you see what happened in the 2013 season, it caught a lot of people off guard, me frankly as well being one of them. But maybe it shouldn't so much, because if you look at the past 3 years of their draft history, here's how you can kind of sum it up. They have some big hits, most notably J.J. Watt, who they took 11th overall in 2011. I mean, he is the franchise player. He's the best defensive lineman in the National Football League, and I don't really think there's an argument to be had about that. And to get him at 11th overall is a great epic steal. This is a guy that looks like he could be a Hall of Famer, and to get him outside of the top 10 is something. 2012, they take Whitney Merciless. They convert him from defensive end to outside linebacker from Illinois, and he had a good, solid 2013 campaign. He's had a good, solid start to his career. Yes, he could be a little more productive, but he definitely has a bit of bust, and he definitely has a bit of miss, so you would classify him in the hit category. Same thing with DeAndre Hopkins, their first-round pick last year out of Clemson. The problem with taking DeAndre Hopkins in 2013 for the Houston Texans was in part the number 2 wide receiver position was an area of significant need for so many years, and by the time they finally got to it, the time they finally got to addressing it, it was all too late. But the last 3 years, they really have hit on their first-round picks, which is a good thing. That's where you're supposed to get your stars. You don't want to miss on those first-round picks above all else. The problem is the Texans have had a lot of misses in rounds 2 through 7 over the past 3 years. So you look at the depth of that team, that depth is really lacking, and you saw that play out during the 2013 season as guys like Brian Cushing go down to injury, etc. The depth just wasn't there. The young talent isn't there like a lot of people may believe. Look at the past 3 years. In 2011, when they could have had guys like Kyle Rudolph or Randall Cobb in the second round, or even a Justin Houston in the second round, they didn't. And you look at these being areas of need for this team still heading into the 2014 NFL Draft. Tight end, wide receiver, 3-4 outside linebacker. Imagine if they would have drafted any of those 3 guys, how much better off they'd be as an organization. You look at 2012, when they sat there and had multiple third-round picks and missed out on a chance with their first third-round pick to get a Russell Wilson. Imagine how differently this draft would shape up now if the Houston Texans already had Russell Wilson in-house. Imagine how differently the National Football League would be right now if Russell Wilson was a Houston Texan. But they also had some big misses later on in the draft when they took Randy Bullock, the kicker, in the late rounds. They passed on guys like Alfred Morris, who was a perfect fit for that zone-blocking, one-cut scheme that Gary Kubiak was running in Houston. And a couple picks later, Blair Walsh, the kicker, who went on to Minnesota and was an all-pro as a rookie. So not only did they not get the best available player on the board in the 6th round, they didn't even get the best available player at that position in the 6th round. So they missed on both Alfred Morris and Blair Walsh. And in 2013, again, they missed on guys like Larry Warford and Tyrann Mathieu when they took DJ Swearinger instead in the 2nd round. Those are the type of things that could come up back to bite an organization in the butt big time. And it definitely has for the Houston Texans. They have some star power, they have some impact players, but they lack quality of talent on the overall roster and quality of depth, and in particular, young depth. Now, the good thing for the Texans is they had that terrible season in 2013, and it sets them up in a very powerful position here for this 2014 NFL Draft. You've got a total of 11 picks for the Houston Texans. A first, a second, a third, 2 fourths, a fifth, 3 sixths, and 2 seventh-round picks. A few compensatory picks making up part of that 11 overall. But you think about it. They're picking first overall in every single round in the draft. So again, it puts them in a tremendous position of power. And having those compensatory picks mixed in allows them some flexibility to move up and down in the draft, accumulate either additional picks or to be able to move up when they need to. And when it comes to their draft strategy for the Houston Texans next month, I think first and foremost, they have to find that franchise player at number 1 overall. It's not every year that you get or hope to get or want to get the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And this is a really good draft, so it is critically important that the Houston Texans find that franchise player at number 1 overall. And then take those 8 day 3 picks that they have and use them as currency. Either it allows you to peel back in rounds 2 or 3 and accumulate even more picks for this year's draft and the next year's draft, and you position yourself very well for the now and the future, or you take some of those picks that you have on day 3 and you use those as currency to move further up in day 3 or even back into day 2. Use that currency to help get you some impact players that maybe have fallen down the board that you have rated higher than where they ultimately are. But ultimately, the big strategy here to me for the Houston Texans needs to center around copying a divisional rival, and that is the Indianapolis Colts and what they did in 2012. They drafted their franchise player number 1 overall, and then they sat there and they surrounded that number 1 overall pick, that franchise player, with multiple pieces on that same side of the ball to put him in the best possible situation and positions to succeed. And that is exactly why the Houston Texans have no fucking business drafting Jadeveon Clowney number 1 overall. Here's the thing. A lot of people will say, well, he's the best player on the board. I dispute that. Not only do I not think he's the best player on the board, I don't even think he's the best defensive player on the board, and he most definitely isn't the best scheme fit for the 3-4 defense that the Houston Texans are going to run in 2014. That would be Khalil Mack, the outside linebacker from Buffalo. There's questions about whether Jadeveon Clowney would be a better 4-3 defensive end or a 3-4 outside linebacker. If you have to question it, go with the guy that you know is going to be a for sure can't-miss 3-4 outside linebacker. In fact, you could even play him inside in the 3-4. I truly believe that in Khalil Mack. But at the end of the day, the Houston Texans have lacked one thing throughout their franchise's history. It's ultimately why they made the trade several years back for Matt Schaub, in part because of the failure of the David Carr experience. The Houston Texans need that franchise player, and they need it at the quarterback position. For anybody that sits there and says, well, in this case, you could sit there and take a Jadeveon Clowney and take the quarterback later. Shut the fuck up. No. The Houston Texans must take a quarterback number 1 overall. This whole talk of them recently exploring the options of trading down, to me, that's a big smokescreen. They're hoping somebody is going to pay too much, like a Jacksonville or a Cleveland, to trade up to number 1. And if they did that, that would be fine, because I would still put them in a position to draft a franchise player. But at the end of the day, I would expect, at least at this point in time, that the Houston Texans will sit tight at number 1 overall, and that pick must be a quarterback. Now, I anticipate that quarterback being Blake Bortles from Central Florida. I do not agree with that, but I could see where Bill O'Brien would like him, and he would maybe be the best schematic fit for what Bill O'Brien wants to do on the offensive side of the football. I don't have Blake Bortles rated as anything more than a 3rd-round prospect, but again, sometimes that's based off of the scheme fit and what you're going to do on the offensive side of the football. But there is a lot of upside to Blake Bortles, and he does have the potential to become a franchise quarterback. So the Houston Texans have to take that quarterback, whether they feel that's Bortles or Manziel or Bridgewater, what have you. They have to take that guy number 1 overall. The Houston Texans for so many years have been lacking at that quarterback position, and lacking ever since they came into being in the 2002 season, a real, legit franchise quarterback. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the number 1 biggest priority for the Houston Texans in this offseason. Make no mistake about it. You can take all that Jadeveon Clowney and pound it up your ass. And if the Houston Texans are stupid enough to take Jadeveon Clowney number 1 overall when they clearly shouldn't, they will just be repeating the same mistakes of 2006 when they ultimately took Mario Williams number 1 overall. Now you will sit there and say, whoa, they passed on Reggie Bush and Vince Young. Well, what did they really miss out on? Okay, what did they ultimately really get in Mario Williams? They found their franchise defensive end. Unfortunately, it came 5 years later in J.J. Watt when they took him 11th overall. And where's Mario Williams now? He's off in Buffalo. The organization doesn't really miss Mario Williams. They really don't. It was a bad decision. Charlie Casserly is a dumbass for making that decision. Ultimately, the reason they made that decision was because of the fact that Mario Williams was going to take the least money out of the 3. And never twist it. Never mistake yourself. They had Bush higher on the board. I even think they maybe had Vince Young higher on the board. Williams took the least amount of money. That's who they went with. So now in terms of once they find that quarterback, I think a lot of their team needs still around the offensive side of the ball. Like I said, I feel their draft strategy should mirror what the Indianapolis Colts did in 2012. You take your young franchise quarterback, number 1 overall, and then you surround him with help and as many pieces as you possibly can to help put him in the best possible situation to succeed, which is what the Colts did with taking the Coby Fleeners and the Dwayne Allens and the T.Y. Hiltons of the world. You have to do that. The Levon Brazils. I mean, they did a phenomenal job in that 2012 draft of finding their guy and then surrounding him with help, putting him in the best possible situations to succeed right from day one. And that's what they need to do here. Another big weakness for the Texans in 2013 was their inability to effectively pass protect for any quarterback. It didn't matter whether it was Matt Schaub or Case Keenum, didn't matter. So you got Dwayne Brown on the left side. You got to find that right tackle. Somebody like a Cyrus Quandizio or a Morgan Moses or a Joel Bitonio. Somebody that can go in there and, maybe Quandizio would be a bit of a risk because of the potential medical red flags. But boy, oh boy, you're talking about a guy at one point that was maybe viewed as a top 10 or top 15 prospect. You get him at the beginning of round 2. He could play that right tackle position for 8 to 10 years on the opposite side of Dwayne Brown. And now you are really helping your young franchise quarterback. They need another tight end. I would say, at the beginning of round 3, if a Troy Nicholas is there, he would be a great value. Even taking 1 or 2 of those third-day picks and using them again as currency to move a little bit up into round 2 to ensure yourself of getting that tight end, getting that intermediate target, getting that safety valve for your young quarterback is incredibly important. That's why the Colts took 2 of them in 2012. They could use some help at outside linebacker. Maybe a guy like Jackson Jeffcoat early in the 4th round would make a lot of sense. They need another wide receiver. I know he said, well, you've got Johnson, you've got Hopkins, and you've got Posey, and you've got Martin. You got 2 guys, and then you got nothing. What they need is they need a real legit explosive slot weapon that can do damage over the middle and out of the slot and stretch opposing defenses vertically. And that's something a Mike Davis out of Texas could do. And then they could use another running back. You're going to have Arian Foster. You're going to have Dennis Johnson. Ben Tate has gone to the Cleveland Browns. You need somebody kind of like that scat back, that third down back, that change of pace back that you could also line up outside at wide receiver. And he can make some plays happen there. A Darren Sproles type of back for that system. And I think somebody like a Dree Archer from a Kent State late in the 4th round, early in the 5th round will make a lot of sense. The Houston Texans, to me, ultimately have to realize that they need a franchise quarterback. And there is a franchise quarterback available in this 2014 NFL draft. They just have to make sure that they find the right one. Anybody that tells you that this quarterback class isn't all that good is full of shit. It is pretty good. It's just a matter of determining which guy ultimately will be worthy of that number 1 overall selection. I can guarantee it. I'll put money on it, and I will go to my deathbed sitting there saying this, that there is at least 1 franchise quarterback in this 2014 NFL draft, maybe 2, maybe even 3. It's up to the Houston Texans ultimately, in my opinion, to find the right one and then spend the most of the rest of the draft in May building around him and supporting him and giving him as much help as possible to put him in a position to succeed, not down the road, but immediately from day one. That's what Bill O'Brien and the Houston Texans front office, in my opinion, need to do, what they should do. Will they do it? We'll see. Next up, I'll take a look at the team that originally would have had the number 2 overall selection thanks to their terrible season if they hadn't traded it away in the RG knee trade, and that is the Washington Redskins.